Yeah, Zari here. So I just finished a T120 pit run here, which is my record, and it was a pretty awesome run. And the boss fight was really long though, because it was versus Slither, as you'll see later here. But I am running the pit pushing variation of my build. The builder's in the description as well as a full video guide if you want to check that out after. And what I'll do is throughout this run, I'll just kind of give you some tips and tricks about things that I'm thinking about or doing that you see me do during this run here. And I won't talk the whole time, but I will try and kind of give you guys some ideas here as we go through on what you should be thinking about as you go through your pit runs, trying to push for those higher tiers. So first off, one thing you'll notice is I am running two pots here. So I'm running the Advantage 2 pot and the Anti-Venom pot, which gives me more health. And you will want to make sure that you're running that Advantage 2 pot because it gives you the 15% lucky hit chance and the 15% attack speed, which helps you hit that 10 frame breakpoint. Now let's talk about the run here. So as you'll see when I go up to the mobs here, I do try to just kind of freeze them all and keep my cow traps on mainly the elite mobs is what I'm going for here, as well as putting down my poison trap. And when the mobs go unstoppable, you'll see the chains on top of their head. Sometimes I'll stay and hit them. Other times what I will tend to do is try to kind of drag them along to the next pack, because when mobs are unstoppable in this build, you do not do hardly any damage to them. So it's much better to try to hit mobs that are not unstoppable and get your full damage on them. Also, if mobs are tightly packed in a group, that is preferable because then you're going to be hitting more mobs at a time. So you really want to kind of try and throw yourself right into the middle of the pack there, get up your cow traps, get up your poison trap, and do lots of damage very quickly. And here, I'm just kind of finishing off of this pack here before we go into the next area. And you'll see as I engage mobs, there's a variety of different ways that you can engage. I don't always engage the same way, but sometimes what I'll do is, as you saw in this pack, I kind of just walked up and threw down my caltrops, and then started hitting, and with shared misery, then freezing them all. You always do want to focus down the shielding mobs, because those shielding mobs are going to make it so you can't do any damage to everything else, and those shield mobs are quite annoying. You don't really want to skip them because they will just kind of drag along with you usually, and you're going to have to deal with them eventually. But oftentimes what happens with those shield mobs is you have to kill them, but you'll make everything go unstoppable, and then you can drag on that pack towards the next group of mobs. Like you'll see here, let's see what I do. So I quickly drop the shield mobs down, and now you can see that those elites went unstoppable. I killed all the smaller mobs, and then in this case, I guess I just decided to stay and wait for that unstoppable to go down, looks like. So, could have dragged that along a little bit, but anyways. Let's see, so I caltrops, go back in, and then try to stand still is another good tip, because I am using intercom, so the more that we stand still, the more often we're going to have that 30% damage buff instead of a 10% damage buff. So that's also another little tip there to keep in mind. So again, drop that shield mob, try to kind of get in the middle of the pack here. And a lot of people skip the smaller mobs, but we can take them out really quick. So I like dropping them personally. But it is preferable to fight with an elite pack on you as well. And here we can see it drop this elite pack really quick because it was a really nice grouped up mob there. I was able to drop caltrops and poison trap on them. Another thing to keep in mind is that what I try to tend to do is before moving on to the next pack, I try to get up 3 combo points so that when I do engage, I can actually start the pack with Flurry, and then I don't have this like awkward kind of slow attack speed at the beginning of the pack, because again, once you start freezing, that's going to lower the amount of time that you have to really do damage before they go unstoppable. So we want to kind of max out the time that we're attacking them, and not having that awkward kind of few attacks at the beginning of Puncture being slow feels a lot better. And we can just drop these guys here, and soon we'll be on to the fun part, the boss fight, as we near the end of the actual dungeon run here. And for the boss fight, I'll try and kind of walk you through some of the things that I'm thinking about, which ultimately the boss fight is really what determines if you're going to be successful or not. The dungeon's pretty easy for this build. As you can see, it takes like 5 minutes or so to get through the actual dungeon. It's really the boss fight that determines are you going to be successful or not, for 2 reasons. One, some of the bosses are just hard to survive on, but some of them are hard to just do damage on because they make you move so much. So anyways, there we go. So the key part of bosses is the stagger phase. So again, we don't do much damage when the boss isn't staggered. So what I do here is I build up my caltrops for a few seconds before I start attacking, just to get that damage stack going. And then right when I stagger, I want to try and stand still as much as possible. I really don't want to be moving, keep up my inner calm. And I drop a poison trap right as he goes into stagger, as well as I want to make sure that I have up my my Shadow Imbue as well for that. So we hit him with Shadow Imbue, hit him with Poison Trap, and then we stagger him again. At the end of the stagger, I refresh my caltrops because I don't want it to go down, and then I continue attacking here. Again, we're about to stagger, drop that caltrops, stand still, drop that Poison Trap, and build up that poison damage as much as possible. And then once you've done 3 staggers very quickly, that's going to be pretty much your best opportunity to do really fast damage in a boss fight, because after those 3 staggers, now it's going to take a little bit of time to get up that stagger bar. And during that time, you just want to kind of just be trying to hit the boss as much as possible to continuously try to get up that stagger. Slither is a very tanky boss. It's one of the more tanky ones that has more health, so it takes a long time. But I actually find him to be somewhat of an easier boss when it comes to it, even though he has a lot of health. He doesn't have a whole lot of threatening moves. He doesn't really move around a whole lot. So you can keep him in the caltrops pretty easily and just keep on building up that bar. And then once again, you got to be paying attention to that stagger bar. And as it goes, you want to again stand still and hopefully have up your caltrops, have up your poison, have up your Shadow Imbue if you do it correctly. I kind of screw up a few times in this fight here with that, but it doesn't always work out perfectly as you're trying to like dodge all these stuns and everything. And then you just keep on rinse and repeating that over and over and over until eventually the boss dies. And in my opinion, I really feel like they should make boss fights take less time and the dungeon take more time. That would really help out this build for one, because again, we really don't want to do damage in the stagger phase here. So that's kind of the weak point of this build, and that's just unfortunately the way that close quarters combat works, is that we're stacking the crowd control percent in order to get our close quarters combat buff to do an extra 100% damage or so. But unfortunately, the CC percent additive damage that we're stacking doesn't work when the boss isn't staggered. So we lose a lot of additive damage along with all of our multipliers, making us do a whole lot less damage. So you can see like when the boss is staggered, my poison is doing probably like 500 to a million plus, or sorry, 500 million to a billion plus damage at times, versus when the boss is not staggered, we're getting around maybe like, what, 30 to 50 million ticks or so per second. So it's like a 10 to 20 times less damage or so. It's a pretty big difference. And we have about 5 minutes and 30 seconds left in the fight here, and we're gonna have to go through a few more staggers. This fight, I think I end up staggering the boss like 11 times if I counted correctly, which is pretty insane. I don't think I've ever heard of anyone having to stagger a boss this many times. But because we have so much different crowd controls and we're attacking so fast, we're able to stagger the boss in about 50 seconds every single time. So we just kind of, again, keep up that caltrops, and then eventually, once you get to, like, I think it's like half health, then you're going to get that additional shadow spawning, in this case Lilith here. And luckily I seem to be pretty tanky enough that I can actually take those waves and take most of these hits without too much of an issue. So even though I'm kind of trying to avoid them actively, I probably in hindsight could have tanked some more of these, but I was kind of keeping an eye on the timer and how much health they had and how many staggers were left. So it felt like as long as I played careful and just didn't get stunned and get hit a bunch of times, that I'd probably be able to finish this. And it does come out to be pretty close, as we'll see towards the end here. So we get that stagger, saw some good damage there, get a bit lower, and we dance some more. And keeps on going. And after this, I'll show you guys the various gear that I'm running, as well as talk about some of the skill points that I changed around for this. And another tip that I just thought of here is that one thing is that when you use Shadow Step, it actually keeps you from losing your intercom buff. So when you're standing still, if you want to not lose your intercom buff, just hit Shadow Step, and then you will keep up that 30% extra damage, which is also very helpful. You'll see me use this a lot in order to reposition or to dodge something. So as those shadows create those like 3 orbs that are spinning around me, I can Shadow Step to the boss instead of trying to like dodge, and that way I don't lose my intercom buff. And then I also use Shadow Step a lot for just getting back on the boss to keep higher uptime. For example, after I use caltrops, I'll Shadow Step back onto the boss. But when you use caltrops or get knocked around, you do lose your intercom buff there. Or definitely when caltrops. I believe when you get knocked around, you lose it too. I'm not 100% sure about that. If someone knows, let me know. If someone's actually tested it. It's hard to tell with so many buffs on. And Slither here is eventually going to die here, hopefully. Maybe I'll put up a stagger counter here. One thing that's kind of annoying about Slither is just all the stuns that are constantly trying to get you. You have to keep on dodging or just Shadow Step out of. But it's kind of a fun fight just because you're constantly having to dodge stuff. But also it's not all that threatening, so like some of the other fights, some of the bosses, some of their moves do so much damage, it's that if you don't dodge them, you just like pretty much insta-die. But again, personally, I feel like I'd rather see the bosses have less health, but then force you to do the mechanics and have maybe less mechanics, which I know like in the next patch it sounds like they're making it so that there's some cooldowns on some of these mechanics here, so you're not getting hit by like 2-3 different mechanics all at the same time. But I think it'd be cool if there's just like one mechanic at a time, like they're going to be changing it too, it sounds like. But then the boss have less health, but then you have to actually do them because either the mechanic is more threatening, like it does more damage, or the mechanic does like kind of like a stacking debuff, sort of like with torment bosses, where you have to dodge them, otherwise if you get hit too many times, then you just eventually lose. And the last stagger here, as we get down to 25 seconds, we did it! Alright, so let's look at the skill tree here. So I've made a few changes, so I got rid of a couple points in siphoning strikes as well as stutter step, and instead what I am taking is I've got poison trap here, which is going to give me 10% more poison damage for more damage versus that boss there. And then also I got rid of dash because I'm not going to use as much mobility anymore in order to make space for the poison trap. And then to get some more damage here, I do take all of the lucky hit chance possible. So I take 3 in Second Wind, 3 in Alchemist Fortune, and I also got rid of more of my mobility haste here as well, because the idea is for pushing, we want as much damage as possible and we want as much survival as possible. So again, you can see my setup here. Now for my gear, you can see what I'm wearing here. So I got Andes, of course, we got Umbrus. You'll notice that I am wearing all of health gems because I do need lots of health. I am using Shared Misery here, and while I could go with Elements, Shared Misery makes me go through the dungeon much faster, which gives me a few more staggers for the boss fight. And then Might, and then I've got Concussive Strikes here, Retribution. You can see that I am taking more damage on my bow here. I got rid of the max health roll. And then I am taking Pestilent points, and here I'm running a triple DPS dagger here for more damage, so dex damage over time. And then I have Intercom, and Rapid, and Noxious. Hope you guys enjoyed the run, and I'll see you guys in the next one.